everyone. Welcome to the Beyond the X's and O's podcast, brought to you by the Coaches Site, the #1 online resource for hockey coaches. This podcast is hosted by myself, Dr. Cassie Preston, a mental performance coach and founder of CP Mindset, and Christy Piero, who has spent the past 30 plus years in the game of hockey from the NHL on down, including where he coached me back in our junior days. And now we work together in the mental performance and leadership space. Chris, we've got a timely episode about performance anxiety and performing under pressure. There's playoffs coming. We've got one of the teams I work with, and Trevor Large and Canisius. They're at the NCAA hockey tournament. They're going on a great run. March Madness is going on. So lots of concepts and that are related to this. And again, like performance anxiety is such a huge thing. We'll get into it in the actual episode, but what's your take on the importance of this topic and with everything that's going on as well?
You know what? I love the topic. It was great doing the episode with you, Cass, and certainly it's very apropos given the timing we're in with all these athletes and obviously the NCAA hockey tournament, as you mentioned. A lot of playoffs for minor hockey players and junior and tryouts, as you mentioned. And a lot of times, we delve into the concept of making the context of what's going on being a little bit bigger than it actually should be. And what that does and how that affects, the player and their ability to perform, and hence that anxiety that comes in. So it's kind of it was interesting to talk about it, interesting to delve into it. This has been around forever in terms of how performance gets affected by how people, attach a meaning to an event. And, so yeah, it was great. It was great topic. And I do want to say, you mentioned Trevor Large and Canisius. What's interesting is first ever head coaching job I ever had was at the junior A level back in the late 90s and with the old Brampton Capitals, and Trevor Large was a member of that team. So I had the opportunity to coach Trevor as well, and certainly want to wish him and his Canisius Griffins all the best as they play and at the NCAA hockey tournament, as you mentioned. And I know you've done a lot of work with him this year and his team. So I think it's great that there's this connection to Trevor through both yourself and my experiences. So anyways, as it pertains to the topic, great topic that we had, enjoyed it, immensely. So, worth the listen for sure.
Yeah. And the one thing I'll say about it before we start diving in is to me, this episode is a lot about breaking through the limiting beliefs, the cultural norms that are often perpetuating performance anxiety. Like I said, it's a huge topic. We see a lot of the athletes coming in. One of their main issues is performance anxiety. So for coaches, for parents, for athletes listening, this is a good breakdown of, reconsidering what are these limiting beliefs and the way we're thinking. And as well, this is also a follow-up episode. We have another video out there, and there's a link in it in the write-up about how to perform under pressure, and it gives more of a 3-step approach, and we touch on that in this episode. But this is a nice way for us to kind of tackle it together, break through some of those cultural norms and beliefs. That's like, I think we can look at this differently, and so it was fun to do. Chris, do you want to add anything before we just let the listeners dive in?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's also what it allows for parents to do, it allows for coaches to do, and allows for athletes to do is look at things in a different way, shift the paradigm of how they're approaching their pursuit, their game, their event, whatever it is, shifting that paradigm and being able to understand that you don't have to always revert back to, what you always know. So that's the essence of, I think, what the whole podcast was about. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, reminder for everyone to like, subscribe, and share all that fun stuff, and enjoy this episode as we keep going beyond the X and O's.
Enjoy, everybody.
The Coaches Site is hockey's leading online coaching resource and was created to provide hockey's top coaches, leaders, and performance experts with a platform to share their experience and insights with coaches and organizations of all levels, with the goal of enhancing the development opportunity for their players. A membership includes access to 500 hours of educational videos, a library of over 700 drills, articles breaking down the latest tactics and systems, and the opportunity to join a coaching community of over 15,000 coaches from around the world. Regardless of the level you coach, the Coaches site is going to provide you the ultimate coaching toolkit. Listeners of the Beyond the X's and O's podcast can save 25% off an annual membership by using the code BEOUTSTANDING when you register. Again, get registered today by using the code BEOUTSTANDING at thecoachesite.com.
CEP Mindset provides mental performance coaching to elite athletes, teams, coaches, and business executives so they can achieve consistent elite performance. Our one-on-one coaching programs help elite athletes break through their mental blocks and take their game to the next level.
In addition, we offer team programs that help athletes improve their mental game and leadership skills. An important part of these programs is we work with you, the coach, to go beyond the X's and O's. We help you develop the human skills of leadership and become your listening partner. Just like athletes need coaches, so do coaches.
And at CEP Mindset, we don't just work in sport. We also work with high-performing business executives and professionals, especially those who relate to being an elite athlete and want a similar approach to optimizing their performance in work and life. Find out more at cpmindset.com.
Hey, Cass, how are we doing today? Today, I think in some of our discussions, we want to talk about some performance anxiety, because certainly there's a lot of calls that we receive from parents about their sons, their daughters having this anxiety when they have to go out and perform, whether now it's playoff time, it's tryouts coming up, it's, what's going on next year, all those kinds of things. What do you have to say about that stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a huge topic. It's one of the top ones that we deal with. You see coaches like they're like, why are my players so nervous, frustrated? Like they're worried, they're doubting themselves. Like performance anxiety is this big overarching thing. It's like, how do we perform under pressure? And we have a whole video that's kind of more direct to that. Today, I want to debunk some of the myths and allude to what coaches and what people can do to overcome that performance anxiety. One of which, and my biggest one, is the need tos, the have tos, and the shoulds, which is ingrained in sport culture at large. Like, hey, we have to do this. We need to do this. We should achieve this. And what does that do to the athlete? Sometimes it's fine. Some athletes yeah, whatever. They filter it. They let it roll off them. They embrace it. They enjoy it. But a lot of athletes, and especially with how zoomed in and with social media and today's youth, I think, are that much more sensitive to the words and the context and the pressures that they feel that they interpret. Now, we'll use pressures often in quotes in this episode, but the idea is, well, what is that doing? It's putting this fear state. They're getting into this afraid to make mistakes, focusing on the worst case, the threat of it. And when you focus on the threat, then you tense up, you panic, you don't trust yourself, and therefore you don't perform well. That's what performance anxiety is. But it's one of the main areas or issues around it. And the common reasons is because we're using perpetuating language like, this is a must-win game. We have to do well. We need, sport, you don't need to play sport. It's a choice to play. And when we get into some of the solutions, we call it, the screw it's detaching and letting go of the results and embracing and enjoying the sport for what it is. So that's one of the things that always gets me. And I tell athletes all the time. And a good example, I was just telling a guy that's likely to get drafted this year in the NHL, and his teammates are going you will get drafted. Don't worry, man. Don't worry about you're good. You will get drafted. And they're trying to predict and thinking he should get drafted. And he knows that he might not. He's a fifth round. And I'm no one's telling him. And I'm I'm going to tell you. I don't want to have to tell you this, but you might not. And it's being able to accept the range of results and let go of the noise. So now we can just go embrace and be in the moment. And when we talk about a reset routine or acceptance, it's getting to the root of the issue. What is it that we're holding on to? The things that we feel like we have to, we need, that we're fearful of. And when we can address the fear and we can overcome it, it stops weighing on us. So I know we're going to go on a couple different tangents, but that's my first one. The need tos, the have tos, that should mindset, that language. It's so common, and we got to be careful and be mindful of it because it can have some pretty heavy or make it challenging for athletes with that performance anxiety. So what's your take on this, Chris? I know we got a little bit more to cover, but that's my first run.
Yeah, you know what? And you speak to it from so many different ways and levels based on your experiences, both as a high level hockey player and then obviously now doing, the work that you're doing. with CEP mindset, and it's fantastic, and all the research that you've done. And I guess, from my experiential piece, I think it's a funny thing when you look back on specific, areas of my coaching practice over the years, and where it's, it's gone, and I think where it's evolved, and I'm always evolving. And I think that's the beauty of where we're at and having this discussion. One of the biggest things that always strikes me as being pertinent is the idea of not letting the context of, a lot of coaches build up that context, as you said, it's a must-win game, or it's it's game 7, and we need to do this, and so now all of a sudden, some athletes, hey, thrive under that, and they get excited by it, and some athletes don't. It's the ones that don't that we're going to need to rely on, as a coach in game 7 of a final, or the championship game of a tournament, or whatever, or even, hey, it's a tryout and you're going out to put your best foot forward. It's making the context a little bit bigger than it actually really is. The game hasn't changed. There's still 2 blue lines and a center red line. There's still 2 goal lines with 2 nets. Some rinks are bigger, some rinks are wider, all that stuff. That's definitely out there. But the game of hockey doesn't change, and it's still played by 5 skaters and a goaltender. And I think that's the idea. And I'm reminded when I say this. Last year in the Stanley Cup Finals, Victor Hedman was asked. It's the 3rd Stanley Cup Finals in a row that Tampa Bay was in, and they asked Victor Hedman about, how does he maintain, or how does the team and how are they maintaining this high level of excellence? And he just said, his simple answer was, we don't let the moment be bigger than any one play. Basically what he's saying is just staying present, the idea is that, hey, this is, the play that I've got, or the puck that I've got on my stick right now is the most important puck that I've got right now. I can't control what ends up happening at the end of the game or the end of a series, whatever it may be. So I'm always struck by that, because I think that's such a big thing. And so it's being able to provide coaches with the tools and the necessary understanding that don't make the context be bigger than it actually really is. And certainly your athletes, especially the older ones, they know that, hey, it's game 7, they know, or it's an elimination game, they know. So let's figure out how can we put these players in the best possible positions to succeed. Then obviously it's not about it's not pressure. There's no anxiety. You're just letting the players play to their capabilities and what they're designed to do. So yeah, again, a long-winded way of me, saying it. It's being able to flip the script in terms of the narrative of saying, hey, let's put these players in the best possible positions to succeed and to their capabilities.
Yeah, and I often use the word, like, it's that ability to zoom out. And we talked about, like, what does pressure really mean? It's like, oh, I'm feeling like I always use pressure in quotes. It's like, pressure is just a privilege. Pressure is just what you make it. And instead of, like, we can zoom out and get a perspective, like you're using the Victor Hedman example is a great way to, like, okay, we can see it for what it is. Let's just go play our game and the things that we can control. I think the other one I know I wanted you to get tackle a bit, and you talked about a bit before within one of the examples, but the survive over thrive mindset is a huge part. As I alluded to earlier, we get into that fear state. We're focused on the threat. We're focused on surviving. And as long as we're in that state, we're not going to be relaxed, trusting ourselves in the moment. And so we want to encourage and focus on, no, my job is not to survive. I'm here to go out there and thrive and have an impact. I use the example, we're often naturally in a human survival instinct to focus on the threats and survive. Like, you're going through the forest, you're more likely to notice the tiger that might jump out and kill you than the blueberries that help you thrive and are enjoyable. And so, but what happens is there is no real tiger that's jumping out in this situation. So we don't have to be so concerned. We're not going to lose that instinct. But what we can do is go through the forest looking for your blueberries. What do you want to go and do and thrive and have an impact? And so that's your process, et cetera. And so we can train, and we'll talk about the coping plan and concept in a second, but that's something we can do. I know you had a good example, I think, with Freddie Mercury around this as well, and courageous and comfortable. Do you want to dive into that? Because I think that was a great one you mentioned off air.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea in terms of high performers in general. They look at any situation, not necessarily game 7 or whatever, or a big event as being that. They don't look at it that way. They just look at it as another opportunity to get it right. And it's being able to say, hey, I'm going to thrive. I'm looking forward to this opportunity to get on stage. Like Freddie Mercury, the example that Freddie Mercury talks about in 1985, Live Aid. There's a famous kind of video and in terms of him being able to command command 90,000 people at Wembley Stadium, and he basically held them in the palm of his hand. And they asked the question after, they said, how are you able to do that? And he just said, I was just being myself, and the audience embraced who I was and who Queen is as a band. But he just said, my whole connection with the audience was me being myself. And so he didn't look at that as a pressure situation. He didn't look at that as being, I'm anxious he was just going out and doing what he normally does. So can we imagine if we did that with our athletes? Hey, go out and do what you normally would do. And that's where I use the terminology, you talk about thrive and survive, it's being able to embrace the opportunity, embrace what's coming, forward for you. And so it's either looking at yourself in your comfortable self, which is kind of like this, hey, I'm just trying to survive. I'm going to stay comfortable, or I'm going to look at myself as a courageous, how can I be my most courageous self? And when you're most courageous, hey, it doesn't mean you always succeed. And so as a coach, being able to put your athletes in a position to succeed doesn't mean that they're going to, but it's giving them that freedom to be able to be themselves so that they can try to do that. Therein lies the difference for me. So this way, that athlete does not have any anxiety about playing. And I always find there's a fine line. There's like having kind of some sort of nerves or those butterflies, totally natural. But then when you step on the ice, some athletes feel, okay, now let's go. Some still have those butterflies because they're worried about making mistakes. Again, those are the athletes that we want to be able to touch, so we don't have to bench them when the so-called pressure gets going in a game or in an event. We can now put them out on the ice because we've given them the opportunity to thrive. And we're giving them that opportunity to be courageous. And I think therein lies the big difference. And I think that's the challenge for me that I always like to put out there. And you talk about that, the tiger and the blueberries, and I think that's important. I just think that's where, kind of deep breathing is so important prior to an event for athletes. And it just gets them out of their sympathetic nervous system into their parasympathetic nervous system, which allows them to look at opportunities as being able to thrive and excel.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I love people are like, oh, the nerves. I got like it's just energy, and it's about how are we directing and channeling that energy. It's not to remove nerves. Nerves in and of itself, it just means you care. And so, how can we channel that energy? And not necessarily we don't want to have none. It's not about being ambivalent and not caring. It's about being centered and purposeful and intent and relaxed and attacking how we want to go and play and enjoy the game. One of the things I also want to go on before we start diving into some more of the strategies, which, the alter ego, the courageous versus comfortable is a great example of the alter ego and great strategy that we use a lot, is the enjoying the moment piece. Because some of the most cliche advice is someone's going to game, just go and enjoy it. And so people I'm sure every athlete's heard this, coaches say it, everyone says it. And it is good advice. Go and enjoy the moment. But who actually does it well? And most athletes don't do it well because they're holding on to the result. If you want to enjoy the process, the game, and the moment, then you need to detach from the results. And so it becomes one of my biggest suggestions and advice for athletes going into big pressure and quotes, big moments to overcome. It's go stay connected to the love of the game and enjoy it. And and I use this a lot where it's like the goal and the intent is to win. It's always to win. The goal and intent is to do well, perform well, etc. But your why you play is still the love of the game and staying connected to that origin story, or your love of the game and why you started playing the game in the first place. That matters to helping you enjoy. And so you can have that mindset and detach and let go of the need to have to. Then you can be embraced in the moment and just enjoy. And playing at the higher levels and against this actually makes the sport, it amplifies the love of the game. And so versus oh no, it's taken away from it and it's about the goals and the results. No, the goals and the results matter, the context matters, etc. I'm not saying it's not different, but can we stay connected to this? And when you do, and you're loose and you're enjoying, you're having fun, now you're more likely to succeed, which everyone knows. But that cliche is helpful to a degree, but I think it's important as a coach or people listening and understand, want to apply that. Okay, well, how can I make sure I detach from the results? I'll let go and accept the range of results so that I can now truly just embrace and enjoy the moment. And so so that's the key. So I want to shift gears. Do you want to add
Yeah, let
anything
me.
or riff anything on that?
I
Yeah,
want to
go ahead.
jump in quickly, and I want to clarify like when I talk about the context and understanding, I'm going on the premise that the coach and the players, and the coaches and players have done a season long of work, to be able to get to the point of not letting the context be, the game be bigger than, any one play type of thing. So I'm going on that I'm not saying this is something that you just willy nilly do and you play reckless and you give your guys opportunity just say, hey, go out and play. I'm going on the premise as a coach that there's been this season long, or at least a culture building. There's a that you've done the right X's and O's and you've practiced and you built this into the lifeblood of the team. And then this way, those players feel that they've done the work. They can trust themselves. They can trust their work. They can trust the process. That's the biggest piece. So as a coach, I'm going to sit there and say, yeah, I can trust putting little Billy out there, even or I can trust putting so and so out there in this situation because I've done the work with those athletes along the way to get them to there, so they don't look at that as being a pressure situation. It's just another situation, i.e., Victor Hedman's comment. My assumption is John Cooper and his staff have done more than enough work with those athletes to make Victor Hedman believe that the moment doesn't need to be bigger than any one play.
Yeah, 100%. Which leads into the three main strategies. And again, there's a whole video, and we'll have the links of that in the descriptions or the blog post itself. But one of the first big strategy is all about playing to cope. And so if you're physically prepared, which is crucial, because if you're not physically prepared, no mental prep's gonna overcome a lack of physical preparation. It's going to be hard to trust yourself and be in the moment if you're not physically prepared and you haven't done the reps and aren't clear on your process and don't know how you want to show up and play. The mental prep side of playing to cope or coping planning to deal with the pressure or the anxiety or the nerves or the fear is, though, very tangible and very helpful if done well. And the simple gist of it I like to use is like studying for a test. It's way better to study before the test than during the test. And so it's the same. It's like, you're going to game 7, you're going into playoffs. Then prepare mentally. How am I going to respond when I get there? And how you're going to respond is the same you would just respond in a normal game, actually. But there might be more noise. There might be more pull to get sucked into the need tos, have tos, and should. And you're not going to let yourself go there. You're going to say, no, I'm not going to the comfort. I'm not going to the survive. I'm not going to the fear. I'm letting that go, accept it, detach, and just stay present and enjoy and channel the nerves. So that can be used very well. I know there's going to feel like the arousal level, an internal like physiological, psychological state can get too high. I'm going to take a breath, stay centered, zoom out, understand that it's just a game, that I don't need to have to do anything. I choose to, and I enjoy the game. That's called coping planning. And when you do that well, it works quite effectively. And I think the only other big one in there that I like to do is making sure, if you find yourself getting sucked into the risks and the risk adverse mindset that a lot of athletes do, as soon as the pressure comes, I'll put pressure in quotes again, they go, oh, well, now I can't screw up. And they focus on that versus let me go thrive. So Nicholas, one of our coaches, used this. I like the idea of called flip the risk. So we're usually overly focused on the risk of making a mistake, and we're not focused on, well, what's the risk of if I don't go and have an impact and like go and make a play? And it's like the risk of playing safe. Yeah, there might decrease the risk of mistakes, but you're going to hurt yourself in the long term. And when we flip the risk, it's like, well, but if I go do this, yeah, it might increase a bit of the short-term risk. I might make some mistakes, but I'm maximizing now my probability of winning or achieving and and thriving and having an impact. And so that's, again, a coping planning mechanism, knowing, hey, I get sucked into the threat, or I get sucked into I need to, have to, should, or I might get sucked in. I know I might be prone to go towards this. So I'm going to rehearse mentally, which is then the next step, not to do that. This is how I'm going to respond. and you're planning, you're studying for the test. This is how I want to show up. This is what coping planning is. That's what mental prep is in a nutshell. The other line I use around it, because you can also use this for adversity and in pressure. When adversity hits in pressure, how are you going to respond? Well, let's hope the game goes great and it's pretty smooth sailing for the most part, but there's going to be bumps and sometimes some pretty big bumps. And planning to cope with the adversity makes you more likely to respond well to that adversity. So if you rehearse that over and over, it's like, hey, it's the positive power of a negative script. I like that line from Todd Herman. And if thing happens where I get thrown off, or if I'm feeling the pressure and feeling myself get tense, this is how I respond. Take a breath. I use my reset routine. I relax. I do. If the adversity happens, I become a momentum builder. I rise above, keep moving forward. Don't let it bring me down, whatever it might be. And so, and again, we have a full, better breakdown of maybe some of those nuance concepts and how an athlete can apply that in its own video itself. But to me, that's, I think, a crucial thing for coaches, for leaders, for anyone to be aware of with performance anxiety is how can I plan to cope in those situations? In addition to, as you said, be physically prepared. And, it's, and that can give us the confidence and certainty to go play well. But you want to combine both strategies in a really effective way to perform under pressure.
Yeah.
You want to riff on that a bit?
Yeah, it's an interesting piece for me because I mean the coaches that I work with and kind of consult with, it's getting them to recognize and not using that language with their athletes. So it's just being able to for them to show the leadership by being in control of all situations in terms of how they view or how they communicate what's going on to their team. And it's not allowing any hey, this is we're playing a 10th place team or we're playing the first place team. If we prepare the way we need to prepare consistently on the same way, then that allows for our players to understand that. So we're not getting too hyped up as a coach, and we're not going in for the rah-rah speech. It's being able to say, okay, this is who we are, it's what we're all about. Let's go do what we got to do. And then for athletes, again, the athletes that you work with, that I work with, it's being able to get them to understand pressure, again, in quotes, is literally a definition we as humans provide the situation. So some guys, some girls, they deal with the situation and they're ready to go. Hey, bring it on. And then some, they make the moment be, the bigger than any one play. And so it's being able to understand what's the definition that I'm bringing to this situation. So as coaches, again, I'm going to put the onus on coaches here to be able to, frame this in a proper way for their athletes to be able to say, hey, it's a consistent approach. As you say, it's about, almost studying for a test. If you consistently prepare and do the things properly along the way, the test is an easy thing. I'm not saying you're going to get 100, but you should be ready to go. You might get surprised. No different than a game. You may get surprised. Something might happen. It may hit it. The puck may hit a stanchion on a rim, and all of a sudden it's out in the slot, and you guys lose in overtime. Well, again, that may be something out of your control. The point being is, you got to do your job to prepare, so that way, any kind of game is just that. It's another game along the way. So I used the term earlier. It's another opportunity to get it right. Well, that's what it is. It's another opportunity to get it right for both the athletes and for coaches.
Yeah, I love that. And so to wrap up those three steps, so you understand coping planning and mentally preparing and dealing with the pressure and what that means and redefining it. And then you've got that framework. So, but that's just a mindset. That's just a new frame or way of looking at the situation. And then the practical next two steps are, well, do mental rehearsal. And just to elaborate, I alluded to it earlier, is a lot of people do visualization or imagery and they focus on, oh, that means focus on what you're going to go do and achieve, which first and foremost, the results are like the smallest part. Like it's not about imagining results. It's often about imagining my process, how I'm going to play. But what I'm alluding to here, when you're talking about overcoming performance anxiety or pressures or distractions and noise, you can also do just imagery that have nothing to do with actually playing. And it's the in-between moments. How am I responding? What am I going to do on the bench? What am I doing before the game? What am I doing on the bench or in between periods if I feel like I'm getting frustrated about a mistake or something that didn't go my way? And so by rehearsing that, it's now you're more likely to respond well. So that should be part of an athlete's mental rehearsal imagery routine. not just action plan, how I want to go play, what I want to do and how I want to feel, but also what do I want to do and how do I want to feel in those key moments where I might feel that might feel like pressure in quotes. Okay. But that key moments where the arousal level's high and you feel a bit of the nerves in the national anthem or in between periods or whenever the moment might be. And how do we respond? That's then we do it. So rehearsing that over and over again, not just a couple times a week, like 5 times a week, 6 days a week, not just on game day. It ingrains it. We're tattooing to our mind. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. This is how I show up in these key moments. And then I might as well just tail in the last little piece to make it clear as well. The other step is then, well, now measure it. Don't just stop there. That's what do we do after practices and games and reflect and measure and track. We talk about it as a personal scorecard where we assess our own mindset as the athlete or as a team or as a coach or encouraging the athlete. Okay, how are you doing at this? Okay, right now, when I feel like before games, as a classic example, I feel that I'm what percentage of my mind and my energy is going to that thrive, going to zoomed out, relaxed, ready, excited to perform versus, getting nervous, tense, fearful. And it's like, oh, an athlete could be 60% in that category, or maybe they're 80 or whatever it is. And the goal is we want to get that number as high as possible. And then, but tracking it makes it tangible. Okay, this is what we're working on. Just like if you're shooting the puck or working on strength, it's like making something more tangible is really helpful. Hey, as a team, we want to make sure we're relaxed, yet ready and excited and calm and certain and centered before the game. How are we doing as that right now as a team, or how are you doing it as individuals? If this is something where you're in the down to 80, down to 70 or lower, now it's a priority. Do the coping planning, do the mental rehearsal. Those are tangible, practical strategies that you personalize for each person and is quite effective if you do it consistently. So that's the gist of it. I got one other thing I want to highlight here, but is there anything else you want to make sure to share, Chris, today?
Just always, for me, it's about staying as present as you can. For athletes out there and for coaches, just stay as present as you can. It's not getting too far ahead of yourself and making sure that you're staying locked and loaded in the present. So then this way you embrace it as an opportunity, and then you're able to thrive. At least put yourself in a position to thrive in a successful way. And I think that's the biggest piece, I'd say.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we can actually leave it at that. And what I would like to close out on again, reach out if you got any questions. I think this is a timely thing. It's on the rise. There's more people that get into this fear state, whether that's parents, whether that's coaches, whether that's their friends or colleagues, whatever the reason. Social media, a lot of athletes are getting more prone to getting into this. So hopefully that served. People get some benefits, some insights. Go and watch the actual full video, the full write-up on the perform under pressure side on a more direct, practical way to deal with it. But we covered it on, I think, a good high level and get some good misconceptions and limiting myths that aren't helping and often are hurting and maybe making it worse. And I think we'll leave it at that. Hope people enjoyed, and we'll see everyone in the next episode as we keep going beyond the X's and O's.
See you, everybody.